Delegation of leaders from the African National Congress, led by Secretary-General Magashule, due to be in Zimbabwe this afternoon to discuss the situation in that country. There does appear to be a deepening crisis. People there certainly getting poorer. The President, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has said he will not allow people to hold protests against his government. You saw the journalist Hopo Chinono being held without bail for many weeks. Our government has sent 3 envoys to meet with the Zimbabwean government and other role players there. But the Zimbabwean government refused to allow them to meet with opposition parties. Professor Dirk Kotze is a political analyst. He joins us now. Professor Kotze, good afternoon to you. Technically, this is a meeting of fraternal liberation organizations. What do you think the ANC is actually trying to achieve here?
Well, it's typical of the ANC that they've often used party-to-party relations, not only South Africa, but in other parts of Africa also, for example, with Sudan. And even beyond Africa. So that's the one type of diplomacy that they are using. Then there also obviously is the official channels of government-to-government diplomacy that's being used. That President Ramaphosa has done when he sent Sidney Mufamadi and Baleka Mbete. But there was some criticism about the outcome of that and how it was approached. We know that the NEC at the last meeting last weekend took this decision that they must send a delegation as the ANC, as party, to Zimbabwe. So hopefully, this is going to address some of the concerns that exist also in Zimbabwe about the seriousness of the ANC and government, because the envoys that were sent by President Ramaphosa are not members of government at the moment, Sidney Mufamadi and Baleka Mbete. Well, for example, if you compare it with the envoys sent by President Zuma in 2017, those were 2 sitting ministers, the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Intelligence. So I think it was seen as a bit at a low level that the government responded.
It's a very complex situation. Do you think that the ANC is trying to sort of smooth the way for a government delegation? I mean, in other words, you could put it another way, President Ramaphosa has tried the front door, now he's trying the back door.
Yes, I think that is at the moment the approach. This obviously is going to be less in public because it's a party-to-party. It's not an official diplomatic mission that is sent to Zimbabwe. And as we've seen in the past, the relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe when it comes to diplomatic relations have been quite problematic in some cases. I would say the most successful period was actually during the time of the 2008 negotiations mediated by President Mbeki, that led towards the global political agreement and that formed the government of national unity for the next 5 years. But otherwise, South Africa couldn't make much of an impact so far on the politics of Zimbabwe.
It can look like, and let me just explain where I'm going with this, it can look like the ANC and ZANU-PF are very similar. We've seen in the past, for example, our president, their president, holding hands, wearing flowers when our presidents arrived in Zimbabwe. But actually, they're very different in many ways, aren't they? I mean, the ANC, and there's a lot of things you can say about the ANC, but it has, by and large, been committed to democracy. I don't know if you could say the same thing about ZANU-PF.
Yes, that's one of the key differences, I would say, is the political culture that exists in South Africa versus Zimbabwe, as well as the governing parties in both instances. We can say many things about the South African situation, but for example, the basic rights, and I've just looked now at this previous insert about clicks, of the right to protest, for example, is not something which is actually respected or honored in Zimbabwe. While this is a well-established principle in South Africa, the role of the courts is another, I would say, major difference between the 2 countries about the role of constitutionalism in the South African context. So there are seriously important differences. I think something which is more historical in nature is that the ANC and ZANU-PF come from different traditions. ANC obviously was supported and had its headquarters in Lusaka. It was supported mainly by the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union. Zimbabwe and ZANU-PF specifically was supported by the Chinese. So even from a historical perspective, they come from different sides. and therefore were not historically such strong allies. The PAC was in a much stronger relationship with ZANU-PF than the ANC, for example.
There's a lot of really important history to all of this. In the middle of it all, I mean, how do you characterize the relationship between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Ace Magashule, the ANC Secretary General, in domestic politics? The sort of general perception is, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get on the phone to me and tell me, no, they're united, but we kind of understand that there are differences. On Zimbabwe, though, I get the sense, I mean, if we look, I mean, Ace Magashule hasn't said many things, but ZANU-PF was very angry with what he did say. I get the sense that maybe they're working quite closely together. Certainly for the African National Congress to send its Secretary General, its Chief Accounting Officer, to Zimbabwe tells you how important they're taking it.
Yes, no, they do. This is the first time that I can recall where Ace Magashule is heading a delegation like this. So it does give him some sort of diplomatic clout, some clout within the ANC also. But one has to understand, obviously, that the Secretary General is actually the highest post or office in the ANC outside government. And I think what the point that the government wants to, and the ANC wants to make now, is that this is indeed an ANC delegation and not an ANC-stroke government delegation. So it by definition excludes any minister or any person like a deputy president or the president. And I think that is meant in order to see if they can't, at a different level where they don't have to adhere to the sort of the diplomatic protocols and traditions, see if they can't come to a closer and in a more sort of fraternal way, come closer to ZANU-PF in order to see if they can't establish a relationship, because I think that is the first thing they have to do. I don't think we can talk or expect any type of breakthrough at this stage, but rather how to come closer to each other in order to be able to make an impact. Now, some of the reports from Zimbabwe is also that within ZANU-PF there are two very specific camps in terms of how they look at this delegation. Though the more sort of softliners are in favor of it, while the hardliners are saying they are completely against it. And they say South Africa, for example, has a too short history of democracy in order to be taken seriously in this, and all they are supposed to do is actually to give messages of solidarity to Zimbabwe.
So the Zimbabweans want to lecture us about democracy, if I've understood you correctly, Professor. It's quite something. One of the other big differences, and this, I think, in a way, sort of puts the finger on some of the problems in Zimbabwe, as I understand it at least, is that the military is politicized. The military actually, I mean, the military was responsible for a change in government, if we saw the move from then President Robert Mugabe to now President Emerson Mnangagwa. We don't have that here, and that really means that in a way you actually have to negotiate with the military in Zimbabwe, don't you?
Yes, that is an absolutely critical factor. We all know that the vice president was the leader of the coup against President Mugabe in 2017, and is now the number 2 in government. Although he has health problems, but still he's in a very key position. Zimbabweans will tell me what is the situation there, is saying that in all their, for example, state-owned enterprises are headed by former generals or senior officials in government. Many parts of the economy, especially the mining, is dictated or even managed by the military. So for any breakthrough or any agreement, acceptable agreement, it first needs the support of the military. And I think that is one of the hardest, most difficult nuts to crack, is how to be able not only to have therefore a political agreement, but to have an agreement which is also dealing with the vested interest of the military in Zimbabwe.
There's been a lot of pressure, Professor, I mean, you'll have seen this, a lot of pressure on our government internally to take some sort of action. And actually, I mean, it's been interesting to me that in the past there have been big debates in our society about Zimbabwe. I haven't seen anyone or heard anyone saying we mustn't intervene. I mean, everyone seems, I mean, you look at the EFF and the Democratic Alliance, they actually both agree there should be some sort of intervention in some way. And yet, I mean, for our government and for the ANC, there aren't a lot of things that we can do. I mean, switching off the electricity is not going to help. You know, sort of we don't really give much economic aid. We actually have very few levers.
That is indeed so. And if you look at it from a geostrategic point of view, Zimbabwe is actually the gate for us to the rest of Africa. And the more and more, an increasing part of the South African economy depends on trade and economic relations with other parts of Africa. And everything has to go through Zimbabwe. So in order to isolate Zimbabwe is going to be detrimental, absolutely detrimental to the South African economy. At the same time, if you look at the public sentiment about Zimbabwe in South Africa, it is very positive. I attended the inauguration last year of President Ramaphosa not far from me here at Loftus Versfeld, and the president who received the best reception was President Mnangagwa. So there's a lot of public support, public enthusiasm about Zimbabwe. So at the same time, we all know there's lots of Zimbabweans in South Africa, and which makes South Africa at the same time, in a sense, the core of the opposition of Zimbabweans. So there's in a sense two faces of Zimbabwe that we experience within South Africa, and that makes it, I think, very difficult for the government to take one position which can sort of consistently deal with the situation.
And of course, no matter what ZANU-PF says, they say there's no crisis in Zimbabwe. The fact is that we have people coming over every day literally looking for food. I mean, we've seen footage here on Newzrom Afrika of people literally coming to look for food.
Yes, that is, and in a sense, South Africa has become almost an extension of Zimbabwe in many respects when it is about the livelihood of many people. We know how many Zimbabweans are working in South Africa, or especially in the northern provinces, Limpopo, and where they are working. But it's like a daily migration that's taking place between Zimbabwe and South Africa. So that in a sense links the two countries so much that it is, again, almost impossible to separate them in terms of political action.